Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something fall from the bridge. My first thought was, why would someone throw a bag from up there? Immediately after, someone yelled, a person just jumped. I looked up towards the sloping hill, but my line of sight was blocked by the brush slightly blowing in the wind. I could only see a small portion of something black. Above me, the bridge stood about 70 feet tall, with several columns on either side. I was at Torrey Pines State Park near the end of a walking path leading below the bridge to the beach, at the storage bin where I was returning a paddleboard on my day off, one of the perks of being a ocean lifeguard. Unsure, I walked cautiously but quickly around the storage bin. With an unhindered view, I saw the full picture. A man in his 20s was lying next to his backpack and was slowly breathing. His face had a few scratches that were bleeding, and his femur was punctured through his leg. The light caught his body in a way that made the bone look especially white. My heart rate increased, and I could feel the pulsating of my chest. Time seemed to slow. I felt like I was watching from above, then became centered and focused. I went over to him and yelled, "Wake up!" while squeezing the muscle above his shoulder as hard as I could. The patient's body winced slightly, with his hands instinctively moving inward. "He's unconscious," I whispered. When I looked up, I saw a lifeguard in Tower 7 looking at me from 50 meters away. I told the lifeguard, "Call headquarters. Someone just jumped off the bridge." While she ran inside the tower to call for help, I looked at the patient's head, which was slightly bleeding. Then my hands. I thought to myself, fuck, I need gloves. When the lifeguard eventually ran over, she took one look at the patient and her eyes widened. She was young and new to the job and looked terrified. "Can you get the gloves out of the med box and switch C-spine with me? I don't have gloves." She answered with a short and nervous yes and pulled the gloves out of the box quickly. An assortment of people began to look at the commotion. Bikers and runners had stopped along the bridge, which was on the 101. One woman who looked to be in her 40s, holding the hand of her daughter tightly, asked if she should call 911. Yes. Immediately after, another woman, around the same age, introduced herself as a nurse and asked if we needed help. I responded yes again, this time with a little relief. She was wearing athletic attire and tennis shoes, so climbing through the bushes was easy. The nurse moved quickly over and got a pocket mask on the patient's face. I noticed that his chest was moving up and down. I remember thinking he looked as though he was sleeping. I followed his trachea down to where it met his neck and felt his artery. It was pulsating rapidly. As we started to check for other injuries, the lifeguard jeep rolled up onto the beach. One lifeguard pressed the radio on so that I could give a short description. 20-year-old male, fall from 70 feet, open femur fracture, pulses present, and breathing. After the update, I grabbed the oxygen tank and one of the med bags and ran back over. It was a chaotic environment, yet he was still and unwavering, a rock in the sea of moving parts. While assessing the patient, another lifeguard noted agonal breathing that looks adequate, but no air is actually moving into the lungs. I set my knees on the ground and felt the pressure of the branches on my skin. We started artificially breathing for him. Soon after, the patient's phone began to ring and ring. Simultaneously, the nurse noted his pulse was gone. The lifeguard placed his hands on the patient's chest and pushed down, causing a rhythmic thunk. Two groups started to form, one performing CPR, while another began to put a traction split on the open femur fracture. As I held the patient's airway open, I watched the white, chalk white bone slowly retract back inside his body, crunching into the leg while straightening out. We put a C-collar on his neck, put the patient on an AED, and then shocked him twice. After he threw up bile, a pungent black liquid that seeped out of his mouth like sewage seeping out of a drain. His continued stoic, catatonic state painted duality with the organized chaos from everybody around. After 4 rounds of CPR, The paramedics arrived, and we got the patient transferred to the hospital. Just as quickly as the incident had begun, it was over. In the hospital, I worked as in the ER for about 2 years, where I helped acute patients, traumas, and CPRs weekly. Yet this event kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't quite grasp what made this different. I found myself going over what had happened, replaying it step by step like a film, quizzing myself to make sure I didn't forget, making sure I did everything right. I was putting away the board, then I saw the body fall. Then I ran over. His bone was sticking out of his body. My heart rate would increase. I would feel my breath quicken, and the same focus from the scene would resume. Then I would replay it all over again, several times a day, draining my energy from tasks I was supposed to be doing. I didn't understand why or what was wrong with me. In most cases at the beach, we'd never know the answers of what became of patients. This instance was different because I happened to work at the hospital where the patient was taken by the medics. The next day, I asked one of the trauma nurses what had happened. She described that he made it to the hospital where he was eventually stabilized, somewhat. He went into neurogenic shock, and eventually the swelling had caused his brainstem to herniate down through the foramen magnum, the hole in the bottom of the skull. Our efforts to revive him had succeeded. However, he was brain dead upon impact. The family told the nurse that he had been struggling with depression and suicidal ideations. He had just left the ER against medical advice the day before because of depression. In the following weeks, I continued to flow through the sequence of events obsessively. My heart rate would increase. I would feel my breath quicken, and my hands would shake. I went to the second debrief and told the lifeguards that the trauma nurse had said the paramedics praised our work, but left out how upset the family was. I was caught in a vacuum. Life felt like a blur, going through variations of Groundhog Day. I'd be at work doing a task when suddenly I'd zone out from whatever I was attempting. My heart rate would again race, and I'd again go through the steps I took during the incident, chastising myself. No, I didn't do that next. I helped hold his airway open. I would look down and see my hands shaking slightly, feel lightheaded and a hot buzz through my body. Snapping out of my spiraling thoughts, I would tell myself, just breathe. This isn't normal. Act normal. I hope no one notices. I've been a lifeguard since I was 18, and now I'm 30. 12 seasons. Each new season adding more skills to my repertoire. Along with this, I worked in the emergency department as an emergency tech for 4 years, and 2 of the years before this event occurred. In my head, I knew I had a good amount of experience. To compound this, I was validated by everyone at work in the hospital. In many different ways, they would all say I did everything I could have, but I was left feeling uncertain as to why I wanted or needed the validation. The only person that did not give me that support I was expecting was my sister. She gave arguments about why people should be able to kill themselves. People are sometimes just too sick with cancer or another disease. Maybe you shouldn't have helped. I was defensive and argued my position by describing those that had survived suicide attempts ultimately regretted it. They would rather be alive. This conversation seemed to stick with me as I was having many panic attacks at work and outside. I did understand what my sister was trying to say, despite her terrible timing and our differing ethics and perspectives on the situation. Our father died of metastasized melanoma 10 years earlier. He was the first person either of us had witnessed die. It's not fun. His cancer caused him to lose function slowly. First his voice changed, then his mind wavered, causing him to compulsively write down information to quiz himself. Then his ability to walk disappeared. At the end, we all sat around the hospital bed situated in my mother's bedroom and held his hand as his breath slowed over what felt like an eternity. Eventually, this led to the loosening of his grip and the absence of his presence. It wasn't dramatic. It was just quiet, sad. Even though I saw his death coming, the surprise never left. I was broken by it. Firstly, because he was my dad, and secondly, because it showed the fragility of our lives. I couldn't do anything to prevent a terrible outcome. The jumper on the bridge didn't have the depth of a relationship with me, let alone one like a father and son, but the incident did show the gentleness of our lives. I seemed to be gaining a sense of why I was mourning the loss of someone I didn't know. Ultimately, the patient was taken off life support by his family. At home, we put my dad's ashes in an urn that sits on a well-organized dresser in my mom's room. I don't know when, but one day I will lay down with my breath slowing while I stare at an unidentified sky or ceiling. The chaos around me is unreflected in the object I have become. My eyes gently pinned open and glazed over, the iris reflecting a deep, faraway golden nebula burning over the eternity of my life. I wonder if those last sparks from the neurons in my head will make me think about the uncontrollable or the unbelievable.